Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's finale of the second year of the Climate Equity LA series on extreme heat. Today's workshop is on citywide heat safety response and awareness. My name is Andres Gonzalez. I'm program manager for environmental justice at Liberty Hill. Buenas a todas y a todos por venir al último taller de la serie de equidad climática de Los Ángeles sobre la seguridad, respuesta y conocimiento de los impactos de calor extremo a nivel de la ciudad. Mi nombre es Andrés González, soy gerente de justicia ambiental en la Fundación de Liberty Hill. For today's session, we will be using interpreters to help translate into Spanish. Thank you, Rebecca. I ask that if you are language monolingual, to please select your respective language channel by selecting the small globe at the bottom of your screen and picking your preferred language. If you are an English monolingual speaker, meaning you only speak English, please select the English option. Likewise, if you are a Spanish monolingual speaker, please select the Spanish option. Buenas a todas, a todos. Hoy vamos a usar interpretación para el evento de hoy. Les pido que si por favor solo exclusivamente habla un idioma, que por favor seleccione el globito que está abajo de su pantalla y hunde el canal que corresponde a su idioma de preferencia. Por ejemplo, si solo habla español o prefiere hablar en español, por favor seleccione el canal de español. Y si solo habla inglés, respectivamente, elija el canal de inglés. Gracias. I think we have next slide, Rebecca. And before we start today's event, I just wanted to do a brief land acknowledgement that the city of Los Angeles acknowledges the original indigenous residents of this land. Los Angeles was founded on unceded land of the Tongva, Chumash, and Tataviam nations. By drawing on indigenous knowledge and the wisdom of Los Angeles' diverse cultures and experiences, we seek to create an equitable decision-making approach to achieving climate solutions for present and future residents of Los Angeles, while paying proper respects to the history of this land and its original stewards. The city will seek to build reciprocity with local indigenous communities while addressing local climate change impacts, building frontline community resilience, and inspiring Angelenos today and tomorrow to respect the land, water, nature, and air that we share in order to live, play, pray, and work. In addition, as a personal note for this finale, as we wrap up the Climate Equity LA series, I wanted to raise and elevate the relationships that the original nations and tribes held with these lands. As extreme heat, drought, wildfires, and flooding impact all of us in recent years, I ask all of us here to reflect on the relationship of the original peoples of California and as stewards and defenders. During flooding, they moved with the river rather than against it. In wildfires, they maintained and actively kept wildfires in check through prescribed burns. As we address extreme heat, how our policies, actions, and collaboration advance with equity and reciprocity for these lands and for each other. Thank you. And with that, I will pass along to Marta Segura, Executive Director of the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office.
Thank you, Andres. Thank you so much for that wonderful land acknowledgement and recognition of our First People. Hello, everyone. I'm Marta Segura, the City of LA's First Chief Heat Officer and Director of the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office. Today, we are, finalizing this fiscal year's Climate Equity LA series with a really relevant topic on not just extreme heat, but why it's so important to connect community awareness building, community education, community building with our emergency notification systems and alert systems that we have at the city level and the municipal level, and the connection between that kind of official notification system and how people in the city of LA need to be engaged, come first, and be partners, and how we distribute and disseminate that information. I also want to thank, again, the Liberty Hill Foundation for being a steadfast partner in the incubation, support, coordination, development of this Climate Equity LA series since CEMO was founded. I just want to say, I'll say it now and I'll say it later, that we're going to miss them because they're going to, first of all, Michelle Pritchard is retiring. So that's a huge loss to all of us. But second, CEMO will be working more independently because they've done such a great job of building our capacity and developing our Climate Equity LA series, that next year we won't be partnering with them on this particular series, at least not at every series. So thank you again, Liberty Hill, for all the amazing work that you've done. Now back to our session for today. As we all know, heat waves in Texas and Louisiana have caused over 14 heat-related deaths and counting. And in Mexico, there has already been over 112 heat-caused deaths as well. And that's not even counting the deaths in Central America. So as the city of LA, we are very much watching this and also prioritizing health as we prepare and assess for extreme heat and climate hazards. So as you know, extreme heat is our city's primary climate hazard, and we must reduce premature deaths and hospitalizations during heat waves as we create a climate adapted city for all. Heat has been the unreported silent killer, but now that we know, it's unacceptable for our city to not act and not to prevent these preventable deaths and hospitalizations. And these deaths and hospitalizations have a greater impact on low income pollution burden areas of Los Angeles. If you could move on to the next slide, please. With higher rates of pre-existing health conditions in LA, and we need to target these communities for the deployment of resources and infrastructure investments, not just communications and building awareness, but also climate infrastructure investments. We achieve our collective climate goals and protect more people from extreme heat by focusing our solutions and resources to the most vulnerable and frontline communities first and foremost, guided by these pillars: equity, engagement, and education, but also by aligning the metrics of climate, health, and equity. Because when we align these three, we not only can demonstrate that we are improving on our climate infrastructure investments, but that we have healthier, more thriving communities with a focus on equity, and with equity as a lens for all of it. CEMO is creating a heat action plan as well, as required by our ordinance, and co-designing the local hazard mitigation plan, and working with the planning department to create the climate vulnerability assessment, as well as the climate adaptation and action plan with a community-driven approach. I've also spearheaded collaborations with these wonderful departments of emergency management and city planning and public works and so many others, so that we can align our various strategies, align our various plans, maximize our resources, and have the greatest impact. So I want to mention that the long-term outcomes that we seek are very meaningful, strategic, extreme health, climate awareness building, and communications. And to accomplish that, we've launched our Heat Relief for LA campaign that we'll be talking about soon, with over 75 NGO partners to diffuse the information on our cooling centers, our Cool Spots LA app, with both businesses, nonprofits, but the larger LA community as well. And we are modernizing our climate infrastructure, building electrification, shade structures, tree shade equity, resilience hubs, and energy affordability by addressing energy burden. And again, we must align health, equity, and justice so that we can have a better Los Angeles and have a more heat adapted Los Angeles, because there's no question climate change is making extreme heat worse and will continue to do so as long as we keep on burning fossil fuels and cutting down forests. So thank you all so very much for coming to our series today. And now I'd really love to introduce you to one of our next speakers who's going to be having a conversation with me. Her name is Jennifer Lazo, and Jennifer is the Division Chief, Innovation and Development Emergency Management part of the Emergency Management Department for the City of LA. And I just learned this week that Jennifer was at Berkeley, and maybe she could tell us a little bit more about that as well. Jennifer, welcome.
My pleasure to be here. My pleasure to join you all. I'm here on behalf of Carol Parks and the Emergency Management Department. We've been working very closely with Marta over the last year as she's engaged in this heat awareness campaign, and are excited to continue to partner going forward. So thank you, Marta, for having me.
Great. So Jennifer, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about our connection between early notification systems and the need for broader community engagement and equitable community engagement and awareness building for that we're going to be doing with our heat relief campaign. But before we do that, I wanted to see if I can just quickly go through a couple of slides so then that you can connect the early notification systems and all that work that goes into prepare for those early notification systems so that we can connect the two. So next slide, please. Great. So as you can see here, the Heat Relief for LA campaign is not just about a social media distribution amongst 75 organizations. It also includes events like this one, the Climate Equity LA series, the 75 organizations that I mentioned earlier in collaboration with the LA Regional Climate Collaborative, who's been a phenomenal partner and was able to obtain PSA ads for us in all Metro buses. So this summer, you're going to see heat safety ads in all Metro buses, thanks to the work of the LA Regional Climate Collaborative and our collaboration. So besides social media campaign, and so many of you that are watching here today have already volunteered to partner with us to disseminate and distribute that information. We are also working on focused earned mass media campaign because the media is a critical partner to letting people know when the weather is, when extreme heat waves will be arriving and what you can do to prepare. So they interview folks like Jennifer and myself so that they can give you more targeted, specific information around heat safety. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be advertising more on Metro buses, bus shelters, and also engaging our community health educators known as promotoras. And so your alliances, your collaboration, your volunteerism is critical to ensuring that we save lives this heat season, that we prevent hospitalizations, and that we keep our community safe. Then I'd like to say that CEMO incorporates obviously frontline communities and their needs and their perspectives and their preferences for an equitable heat adaptation policy. And then this year, we have created this amazing poster with the support of Lalo Alcaraz, the iconic cartoon artist. And if you are part of our heat relief campaign, you will not only get this in digital, but we're making printed posters of different sizes and postcards of different sizes that include some or all of this information. And we really love your help in partnering with us to distribute this information. And we've also got it in 5 different languages: Tagalog, Chinese, Korean, Armenian, Spanish, and of course, English. And we've been creating a lot of other art that we're anxious to share with all of you. That's going to go either on our bus shelters or banners or other places throughout the city. So that's a campaign in development. And I wanted to call your attention to another engagement tool that we have, which is our Cool Spots LA app that tells you where all the cool spots are in the city of LA. And if we activate cooling centers, they will be there. But we always have our libraries open during their hours of operation. So this weekend, for example, you can go to any of our libraries to cool off. Okay, Jennifer, thank you for being patient and allowing me to talk about our heat relief campaign and all that it entails. And now I'd like to connect it back to the important work that you do at the Emergency Management Department for early notification.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about the sequence of what happens in the city. And then hopefully I'm really excited to listen to our panelists and build off of that information to see ways that we can work with our community more effectively. So we work very closely with both the National Weather Service along with the LA County Department of Public Health, who are the 2 entities that on a government level own heat the most. And so they give us a lot of information very early on when significant weather events are anticipated. Heat alerts are issued by the Public Health Department, and then a variety of different warning statements are issued by the National Weather Service. And what's exciting is that in the last several years, they've actually been able to develop those tools in ways that more effectively capture some of the issues that Marta's been discussing. So things of air quality concerns, heat islands in certain areas that are hard to that were harder to capture. They've actually use demographic information available from the CDC and other census documents to get a better understanding of where there are communities that are going to have a greater impact of heat and more carefully map those areas. So when we get that early notice that a heat event is anticipated, we begin monitoring it closely to see if it's meeting certain thresholds for how significant the heat will be and its impact on health. And when we find an event that's going to result in an excessive heat warning or a heat watch, we will convene the city family to determine what additional measures need to be taken. That can be anything from opening up augmented cooling centers to sending emergency alerts to folks who have opted into our Notify LA system, to looking at what kinds of services we might need to partner with other agencies to open. So there's a lot of different programs that are out there, a lot of groups that come together. With heat can also come fire, so that's also a very important concern, because the last thing we want is additional smoke, which will make that heat issue even more unpleasant and even more dangerous for people experiencing it. So we work together on all of those issues, convene the family, decide where there are areas where there may be gaps in coverage and how we can address those gaps in coverage, and make sure to share that information far and wide. And we're really excited to have this heat network with which we can reach more into the community where folks actually are today to get that information out. Marta, you're muted.
That's super helpful, Jennifer. And I was hoping that you could explain to folks a little bit about this particular weekend, right? And how the city and the county are responding, what the National Weather Service has recommended. That would be phenomenal, like breaking news.
Yeah, breaking news. We have been watching this all week. I think I actually first talked about this heat wave a solid week and a half ago. So it's a thing that we've kept a close eye on. The good news is it's gotten a little bit less intense over time. So the initial forecasts were a bit higher. It's gotten a little bit less. So as of this point in time, within the city of LA, which is the jurisdiction we have responsibility for, there are no heat warnings, heat advisories, heat watches that we are involved in within the city. However, we've been talking very closely with LA County because there are some areas in the county that will be impacted. So that is the Santa Clarita Valley area around the I-5 corridor and the Antelope Valley area along I-15. So those two zones are going to have some of these dangerous heat conditions. And the county is working on making sure all of their maps are updated with cooling center locations, making sure that they are doing messaging and issuing heat alerts for those zones. They still are in the process of issuing a lot of those. You're going to see many of those tools coming out tomorrow. But we are making sure that we've got our most updated information that you can actually figure out. There's a couple of libraries, for example, that are going through some construction right now. So we don't want anybody showing up and knocking on a door that's not going to be open. So we're updating those maps, making sure we have the latest and greatest information, and sharing a lot of information on social media and with our council members and other individuals. So the good news is we actually haven't met the criteria, the thresholds for this to be a significant concern, but that doesn't mean we're not doing anything. We're really closely monitoring it. We're continuing to communicate, which we'll be doing all weekend long. And those libraries will be open. The good news is the holiday where everything is closed is on Tuesday. And this slight increase in heat is expected to finish on Monday, but we'll continue to monitor just because forecasts change. And so if that changes, we will work within the city family to address it.
Great. That's super helpful. And just for everybody listening here today, if you don't have an app or a desktop browser, then you can call 311 and they will tell you where those libraries are. And you only need 2 or 3 hours to recover. If you're feeling any heat exhaustion at all this weekend, and we welcome you to come to any of those city libraries. But there's obviously a number of other places that are public that you can also go to. And I recommend that you do the planning and preparation in advance before you set out on your daily activities this weekend and for the 4th of July. So Jennifer, that's phenomenal, amazing. And like you, I'm really looking forward to listening to our panelists, our community panelists that will tell us what other experiences they've had so that we can integrate that kind of experience into our hazard mitigation plans and climate plans at the City of Los Angeles. Thank you again, Jennifer. Great. All right, well, now I have the pleasure of introducing everybody to 4 speakers. Actually, Jennifer's coming back with us. The first one is Micah Castrillo, the Climate Adaptation and Resilience and Enhancement Intern at CBE, also a youth leader. Crystal Reyes, Cool Streets Team and Community Inspector for Pacoima Beautiful. Welcome, Crystal. Alicia Morales Perez, Senior Research and Policy Analyst for Lane. And we're welcoming back Jennifer Lazo because she will be responding to the input and the experiences and recommendations of these community leaders. So let's see, why don't we start this conversation by asking you, and maybe we'll start with Alicia. What are the barriers for communities to access information and resources on extreme heat? Alicia, welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, folks. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Alicia. I'm a senior research and policy analyst with Los Angeles Alliance with the New Economy. And I'm also here. I'm on, Lane is part of several campaigns, but the one I'm here representing is Reclaim Our Schools. We're a coalition of educators, parents, and students fighting for investments in public education. And increasingly, our work has also led us to climate justice work. And to answer your question, Martha, around some of the boundaries that we've heard, I think one of the things that we've heard a lot, especially from multilingual families, is accurate information and being able to access government agencies that they trust. And so public schools tend to be a source of information that families look towards in terms of getting information. And so as we're trying to create climate investments at schools, we're also trying to ensure and work with our utility and with the district to ensure that information that can be really powerful, that is not only on buses and different other public forums, can also be translated and be reproduced through the school district and share that information, including concerns around heat warnings and alerts through schools. Oh, you're on mute, Martha.
Crystal will, my apologies. Crystal, will go to you next. What are some of those barriers for accessing information? And what are some perhaps best practices for connecting communities to those resources?
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you repeat that?
Sure. So what are some barriers to communicating extreme heat hazards and other climate hazards to our communities? And what are some things that we can do to make it easier for these communities to access those resources?
So I believe the barriers are that some of our community members don't have access to technology. So a lot of our community members don't have phones with internet. They have, like, the phones that they give through, at the EBT offices and stuff. And so a lot of these people also don't know how to access those links. And we're also a working class community. So a lot of people don't watch TV, don't get to watch the news, don't have access to listening to the radio. So I think that personally, as a parent and as a youth that grew up here in the San Fernando Valley, educating the youth here about extreme heat and starting those conversations at a young age of learning how to prepare ourselves, learning how to keep our peers safe, learning how to identify when somebody is going through heat exhaustion. A lot of our youth is stuck with older community members or with siblings, and they don't always have the resources to be cool. Mm-hmm. So I believe that educating the youth is something that we can implement to sorry, I got flustered. Yeah. But I think it's something that we can it could be a main focus for us. Mm-hmm. In order to bring awareness.
Right. So that has a lot of connection with what Alicia was talking about in bringing climate communications and extreme
Right.
heat communications to LAUSD. So very much on the same line there. Micah, could you tell us what you believe some of the barriers and solutions are for these kinds of communications?
Hi, yes, I definitely agree with Crystal. Digital divide is definitely something that makes this information very inaccessible to people. And so some of the ways that we're connecting people to resources is just making sure that when we're considering developing alert notifications, that we're co-designing that with residents, consistently using resident feedback. If we're providing the information to them in a way that is most effective for them. And then also using a variety of resources. So not just social media, but newsletters, physical campaigns, canvassing, providing that information in a lot of different ways.
Great, great. And you worked on CBE's CARE program, right? And planning
Yes.
with communities for extreme heat. Could you give us a little bit more information about that, how that works?
Yes, so CARE is the Climate Adaptation Resilience Enhancement Team, which is part of CBE, or Communities for a Better Environment. Overall, we're an environmental justice organization that's very focused on connecting communities to real solutions. But CARE specifically likes to prioritize climate resiliency, and so making sure that communities have the tools in the ways that are most effective for them, so that they can be prepared for changes as climate change gets worse and environmental disasters become more frequent, that they're able to take the leadership into their own hands and have the skills available to them.
Great, great. And Crystal, I forgot to ask you, you're an inspector for the Cool Streets program at Pacoima Beautiful. What have been some of the things that you have identified or observed and then responded to out in the Pacoima streets?
Okay, so we actually had a field trip where we went canvassing for the Cool Streets program. And so we really got to have like a hands-on approach to listening to the community about what they felt about the program, and if it was beneficial for them. And so the response of the community was very positive. A lot of the community members, the engagement process where there's art that was created with the Cool Streets pavement. And so they involved the community with that. It was at Broadus Elementary School. And so they have a cul-de-sac in that area. And there's some art there by Desi, I believe. I don't remember her handle, I'm so sorry. But yeah, the art there was huge. And so that was big for the kids. Again, they're educating the kids, they're teaching them that they matter. And, this was also extended into the park next to the community, next to that school. And then it was also, I believe, a couple of blocks each way. And so when we went canvassing, those neighbors in that community, they appreciated the Cool Streets pavement, not only because it was cooling their community, but also it addressed another problem in the community, which was potholes. And so the community got a lot out of this program. And the response has been super positive.
That's amazing. So I'm hearing a lot of recommendations to not just engage adults in our communications, but definitely be intentional about engaging our youth. Jennifer, could you comment on, now that all of our amazing speakers have given their perspective, could you comment on what you've heard?
I think it makes a ton of sense, and it's really important that this work filters through the folks that are in our community. A thing that EMD actually started last year and is expanding considerably this year. So the Emergency Management Department, I'm sorry, I'll try not to use any acronyms, I do my best, is that we are hosting Camp Ready LA, and it is literally a summer camp where we are inviting folks from throughout the city of Los Angeles, teenagers age 15 through 25, to come and learn how emergency management works, learn about career fields, learn about options of how they can get involved. And we have seen some incredible students come through. We're really trying to target communities at risk that may not be represented well in this field, because I think one of the best ways we as emergency management can improve is by involving youth from our own neighborhoods who grew up here, who have lived experience of what the challenges are, so that we can incorporate that in the programming we do and the outreach that we do. So that is a program. I think they just closed applications, or they're about to finish closing applications, but it's a really exciting opportunity for us to actually work with the community. And I think we're seeing that same thing, the incredible value that you get out of working with youth. So I absolutely agree.
That's great, Jennifer. And maybe the next time that it opens up, I can help you distribute and disseminate the information because it does sound very, very relevant. And it's a good segue to the next question that I'm going to ask from Alicia. So in terms of resources that you've identified that are needed by LAUSD and students, what are those that you want to recommend for the city, and maybe give us a little bit of an anecdote?
Sure, and this is kind of bridging both of my worlds. In addition to working on our education team and with Reclaim Schools, I'm also part of the Repower LA Coalition. And we, since in November of 2022, we actually won a no shut-offs motion at LADWP. And so low-income customers that are part of Easy Save and Lifeline will no longer have their water and power shut off due to non-payment, which is wonderful. And one of the conversations we engaged in with LADWP was, how do we disseminate this information to the communities that need it most? And so part of the work and continuing in that work, we were able to get extensions on no shutoffs for extreme weather events, which includes extreme heat. And that was recently won just earlier this week. And again, we're asking the same question, like, how do we get this information out to community members so they know that their water and power will not be shut off during extreme weather events? So that is something that we're working through and hoping to bridge with LADWP and LAUSD.
Right. So that's a really good point, that the energy burden that disproportionately impacts these low-income communities is a barrier for them staying cool and staying home like other folks while it's the hottest. So
Right.
If they shut off their electricity, they have no access to thermal comfort or any level of air conditioning or even a fan. So it's critically important to keep those resources to diminish energy burden accessible to everyone. And we'd be happy to help you disseminate that information. So Micah, back to you. What resources have you identified that would be great to get from, whether it's the city or the county? What would you like to see?
Well, one of the resources that CBE is involved with right now are the resilience hubs. So community centers where both youth and adult members can come together to educate on new climate impacts, but also just a safe space to share conversations between community members about the needs that they have. We're also partnering with PSC Health and Energy, who just created a tool that residents can use to identify potential spaces for resilience hubs. It also allows residents to identify local climate impacts in their own neighborhoods. So it really gives them the information to take it into their own hands. And I'm happy to share that link in the chat as well.
That's great. Crystal, back to you. What are some resources that you'd like to see come from any level of government for communities?
So as my experience here from growing up as a youth and then moving out, moving back, the one thing that I've noticed is the lack of AC in most of the homes here. Mm-hmm. And not only the homes, but businesses, the community is very heavily burdened with older structures. So a lot of our of our community members have like wall AC units or the things, AC units that still use Freon, which is a lethal toxic substance. And then also, it's not mandatory for landlords to provide AC in apartments or housing. It's just mandatory for them to provide central heating. And so I think that's also something that needs to be changed, especially for our community in the San Fernando Valley. We don't have relief from the heat during our commutes. We don't have green spaces. We don't have trees. Most of our bus stops do not have shade provided or seating provided. So we're constantly on our feet in the pavement, on the cement with no relief. And then to come home to a hot home that feels like an oven, there's completely, it's inhumane. That's what it is. And so that's what we go through here in the San Fernando Valley for the most part. And if you have central AC, you're very lucky. And you better pray and hope that your AC doesn't break, because if it does, it's super expensive to fix. The apartment managers and landlords, they, prolong it because, and I come from the residential industry as well. So I know that apartment managers are also very burdened because we have to follow policies. And so there's procedures to go through to get an AC fixed because it's expensive, right? So there's budgeting and all of this stuff that comes in hand. And this all falls on the tenants, the community members, right? So I think regulating, the fact that we all need AC. Everybody deserves AC here. And so that's one of the main resources. And I also want to talk about, the burden of the cost of having AC. I know that we've already kind of touched on that, but figuring out a way so that the burden of having to have an AC doesn't fall on the community as heavily as it has in the past.
Well, a little bit later, we're going to have somebody. Thank you so much, Crystal. Those are really insightful points about the right to thermal comfort, the right to come to a home that you can have a refuge from the heat from. And a little bit later, we're going to have the Department of Water and Power address some of the resources that could be available. But I want everybody in the audience to know that the City of LA passed a new building electrification policy, which means that those buildings will be weatherized. Those buildings will have, renewable energy systems. But we want to pass something similar for existing buildings, but we want to avoid unintended consequences of excess energy burden, of displacement. We want to make sure that we are able to support the landlords that do find it a burden to transition their units from where they are now, not providing any AC or weatherization, to having that, to make sure that families like yours, Crystal, and others have the right to be thermally comfortable. And now there's newer technologies like heat pumps that are much more of an energy savings and also a lot less burden to the environment. So I hope to be able to talk about that more at another time, but we do need a more comprehensive strategy to ensure that we do avoid those unintended consequences while having everybody feel like they have a comfortable, cool home when they most need it. So Jennifer, let's come back to you now and see if you have any thoughts yourself on what the community leaders just shared with us.
I think it's really insightful, and it's incredibly hard to try to figure out. Sometimes I can feel like I'm shouting into a void, right? That I am putting out messages, I'm putting out information, and does it make sense? Does it? I use my mom rule, which is if she read it, would she give me a look saying that she doesn't really understand what I'm saying and I use too much jargon? But it's not just my mom. I shouldn't only be using her as a judge. I need to use a lot of diverse folks in the community who have different backgrounds, different views, and different experiences. And so I think trying to write and make sure that we're communicating as effectively as we can, and that our messages getting to the audiences is really important. And I want to tap right back over to Crystal because she's got a hand up.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you. I just wanted to also like talk about some of the things that have helped as a community member. And I didn't really touch on that, but I am a part of Pacoima Beautiful. I've been a member with them. I consider myself a member because I've done so many programs and I've benefited from their engagement, and to the point where now I'm like speaking on things that I'm passionate about. So I did want to highlight like one of the things that I appreciated last year. They were a part of the Cool LA initiative, and LADWP gave free ACs last year to community members. And so that was something that I was there. I saw, I didn't receive one myself, but I did see a couple of community members that I know that really needed it. They lived in like back houses, and you know, it's harder to regulate those situations. So I know that they benefited from those ACs greatly. And I also wanted to talk about like we have the clean air ambassadors as well, and they monitor the pollution in the community, and they can actually give you a monitor for you to have in your home and monitor the air quality in your home, like in your area.
Mhm.
And I think that's super important, like for people that care, to have that information available to them.
Mhm.
And the other thing that PB will start doing, Pacoima Beautiful will start doing this July, is they're going to be passing out cooling kits to the community. We're going to have about 8,000 people receive them in our community. And so that's amazing work being done here. And that's all stuff that I'm going to be a part of. And I encourage my community to, you know, get behind and get educated again. And, you know, we need to fight this together. We need to take care of each other. So these are programs with Pacoima Beautiful that you can become a part of, but there's so many more things here in the San Fernando Valley that are available for us to engage in when it comes to the climate issues.
Great.
And that's all.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you. And speaking of engagement and ambassadors, I wanted to hear a little bit more from Alicia about your climate resilience curriculum at LAUSD and the intergenerational discussions that you're having there to process the work, the design with the students and the parents and the teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. In addition to like communicating the immediate needs and changes that are happening at our utility, we also acknowledge that in order to really combat the climate crisis, we need to really engage and prepare our parents and especially our youth in understanding it from a cultural and racial justice lens. And so as part of contract bargaining that we won with the United Teachers Los Angeles in earlier this year in April, we also included community demands that include climate curricula and making sure that it's fully implemented across LAUSD, that this curricula is being taught to students in a way that they can use their own communities as learning environments to understand the climate crisis, as well as having demands where, you know, all schoolyards and all schools should have 30% greening minimum. This is how we mitigate extreme heat when we have mature trees and tree canopy and shade infrastructure. And so for us, it's definitely trying to bridge the immediate needs now, but understanding that for generations, in order for future generations to really survive and thrive, we need to do learning, and we also need to build infrastructure and public investments in our schools.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I can't wait to see that because it breaks my heart every time I pass a school and I see no trees, black pavement, the kids actually sitting on the hot black tar pavement. For whatever reason, they have them sitting down. It seems very surreal. So thank you for that amazing work, Alicia, with LAUSD, UTLA, and Lane. Micah, let's get back to you and tell us a little bit more about how you raise awareness there at CBE and with CARE and in these intergenerational dialogues.
I think with CBE and CARE, we've definitely prioritized resident engagement. And so we've tackled that in a few ways. One is, like I mentioned, with the resilience hubs, providing spaces where residents can have those conversations. But other ways are by developing practical skills like our climate emergency response trainings that we've been doing with the LA Fire Department. We understand, especially how the climate crisis is going so far, that these situations are not going to go away on their own. The heat waves are coming up more frequently. Natural disasters are coming up more frequently. And so by doing these response trainings and providing these skills where residents can come together and learn them together, it definitely empowers communities to take action into their own hands. And especially when emergency services become unavailable, it just allows them to take that leadership on their own. And so we're definitely focusing on building resilient communities.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and since you mentioned that, Micah, I wanted to just shout out to the Strategic Growth Council in the state of California for coordinating this opportunity for nonprofit organizations throughout California to apply for Community Resilience Center funding. And I guess what I want to say about that is I want to offer the city, along with my colleague here, Jennifer Lazo, to support your operational development and be in communication so the city can be a resource to the development of your community-led resource centers and resilience centers, because we definitely will be a lot stronger together. And I look forward to working with powerful, leaders like everybody here on this panel. And I'm so encouraged and so inspired to see, younger people than, even younger than I got started working on these issues. But it is an intergenerational cross-community collaboration. And one more thing I'd like to plug is that we're not going to neglect investing first and foremost in the historically disinvested communities, which lack the most shade equity, which lack the most infrastructure, which lack the economic resilience to ensure that future generations and the kids of today are thriving tomorrow. So again, thank you to this amazing panel, and I look forward to future dialogues. And now I'd like to transfer it over to my colleague Andres to introduce us to the next section.
Awesome, y'all. Thank you. So we're going to have just a brief Q&A from the general public. If y'all have any questions, please feel free to post in the chat. And thank you to my colleague Alex, who's been helping me monitor just some of the questions. So just to kind of kick us off, we have one question here from Jose Marquez. What are the temperature and weather triggers that create heat warnings? I think maybe Jennifer Lazo, I know you shared a resource in the chat, but if you wouldn't mind maybe possibly speaking on that a little bit.
I'd be happy to. So I will say that heat resource I looked at, and it's actually acting up a little bit. My guess is that they're running an update on it right now, because usually you can see out several days of this heat warning activity, and right now it's just showing today. So just know, check that link again tomorrow. It should be working a little bit better. I think it's they always run an update right when I need it. But what this tool actually is designed to do is to take in, you can actually see some of the description in here, concerns about how heat will actually impact the community. And it was designed, frankly, specifically with the California heat situation in mind, because there was a recognition throughout the country that a lot of the heat-related tools that were being used nationally were very much based on humidity levels that we do not see here in LA. And so it meant that we would never reach certain thresholds because we have a dry heat as opposed to the wet heat you'd find in Florida or Texas or some of these other locations. And so this tool is designed to actually take into consideration local impacts, the local ways that heat impact us, and figure out what those dangers are there. So you'll see they have taken into consideration how unusual the heat is for the time of year, how long it's going to be hot, including daytime and nighttime temperatures, and if those temperatures are posing an elevated risk of heat-related impacts based on CDC data. So they supplement the heat advisories and heat watches and warnings. There's not some specific number. That's one of the key thing, right? Because if it turns to be 93 degrees in February, folks are going to have problems. where 93 degrees in August or September is just a normal day. And so it's a variety of things working together. There's no specific threshold in here. They bring all of these together in these considerations, and this is a publicly accessible site. So the good news, you'll see that they use the yellow, orange, red, and magenta color coding. We have a couple tiny little dots of red when it gets to about Saturday. But other than that, within the city of LA, we're mostly in that orange and yellow, which is a moderate level. It is going to be hot. No one's denying it's going to be hot, but it's mainly going to affect those who are very sensitive to heat, as opposed to having a widespread effect. So it's always, that's why we always do these messaging campaigns for any heat event, because it's really important to share that information. But we're looking at these events that are most significant, because we do live in LA. It does get hot here. I grew up here too, born and raised in LA. But it's the unusual ones that can really trigger significant health impacts and impacts in our environment that we're keeping an eye out on for adding to the already existing set of resources for day-to-day heat response.
Awesome. Thank you. And then I have another question here, Marta. Is transportation to cooling centers a common barrier to the impacted communities?
I would say that it commonly is, because what we really want ideally is for these cooling centers or resilience centers to be less than a quarter of a mile from people's homes so that they can get there easily. There are some resilience centers or cooling centers that the city has that we are creating transportation through DOT, but we have to be a lot more intentional about the design of these customized, localized transportation systems to our resilience centers so that everybody has equal access to cooling centers that needs them. But I'll get back to you on that, because we're still developing this year's overall strategy for getting folks to cooling centers.
Yeah, and I know Micah and Crystal have Pacoima Beautiful and CB respectively have both worked in cooling centers. I don't know if you'd like to add anything else. And again, the question is transportation to cooling centers a common barrier to the impacted communities? And if you'd like to speak on how so.
Well, I'm going to jump in really quickly just to remind folks as we look at resources that DOT buses remain free at this point in time, and they in and of themselves can be a place to sit down and get in the shade and get off of your feet. And so I think that's just a resource with nothing else to remind folks of, that they switched to free during the pandemic, and that is still the way that they are operating today. So just they're almost cooling centers on wheels, right? They travel through our community, and it's a really important resource that folks are able to access at home.
That's super helpful, Jennifer. Thank you. I think we should go ahead and start with Craig on this.
That actually comes at the end, and we have about couple more minutes to just
oh yeah, that's right. I apologize. I'm looking at the wrong clock here. My bad.
All good.
You.
All good. I have another question here. Do cooling kits include heat relief info and resources?
Hi. Yes, that is I believe like what we're advocating for as a community member. That's what I'm advocating for, and that's what I hope to see in these cooling kits. As to exactly what is going to be in the cooling kits, I cannot provide the exact information on that. I'm sorry, because I'm not fully aware of that. Like I said, I am a community member that is going to be a part of this. I just was informed about it, and I'm going to be a part of it, but I'm not sure exactly what is going to be in the cooling kits.
Thank you, Crystal. I have another question here, I believe more for Alicia. How is the City of LA coordinating with LAUSD greener school efforts?
Yeah, it's something that we're trying to work on, and something that we advocated for also through contract bargaining is a creation of community school parks. And so using schools as sites of as park use once school is over. I know there was some kind of talk in the city of LA with board member Rahman in terms of introducing some language around community school parks. So we're interested in working with some of our community partners in that. But I think at the end of the day, there's just so many schools that need greening, and trying to bring state and federal funds down to the local district to scale these projects as quickly as possible. And so if there's definitely folks who are part of a school community who have kids who go to school and would want to partner with us, we'd love to hear more from you.
Awesome, thank you. And then another question here that we have translated, if there are any links to apply to receive home heat thermal monitors, and if so, what cities or municipalities are eligible?
I think that might be a good question when we get to our DWP rep to talk a little bit about some of the resources there.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I'm sorry, was I asked the question?
No.
Oh, no, this was just a general one. But if you would like to speak on maybe how folks can get an air quality monitor as well, as this is very deeply connected to heat.
Yes. So the planning team here at Pacoima Beautiful, I think, takes lead with that. So I can link down below the website for Pacoima Beautiful, and you guys can find all of the information there. For the cooling kits, that information will be there eventually, as well as the information on how to get a air monitor.
Awesome, thank you. And so I have here, as we're wrapping up, I have one question on what are the strategies and moves being undertaken to disseminate information and resources to the unhoused community. We're going to hold off on that one because we're actually about to enter into a section on unhoused outreach and heat awareness for unhoused communities and housing insecure folks. So we'll be addressing that question in a moment. And I think I'm just going to raise a question that we got from the registration that I think is a good outro and maybe a good example of like future plans, etc. We had one member ask, how can we help convert the Las Palmas Senior Center into a cooling center? So maybe if some folks here want to talk a little bit briefly about the process to essentially create their own cooling centers in their communities and neighborhoods, etc. If Marta, you want to kick us off? Yeah,
I think Jennifer can also jump in a second. So basically, a cooling center for the city of LA is just an ADA facility, like the Rec and Park centers that we use or the libraries that we use. But in addition to that, they stay open later, and they stay open on weekends, and they stay open on holidays if necessary during a heat wave. So I think if Las Palmas staff wants to coordinate something like that, they should probably go to the Department of Aging first, because they're in good communication with the Emergency Management Department and the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office. So internally within the city, do you have more to comment on that, Jennifer?
Yeah, just a couple of things to add, because I think this is a question that we get a lot, is why is the recreation center or the senior center that's the closest to me not the one that you're opening in this way? And we have to do a really careful calculation when we're determining which centers to open for augmented hours. First, we're looking at the ones the county operates, which are often very close to the city ones. So we want to spread them out in areas with high risk to make sure that there's some close to various people. But the other thing is the disruption to day-to-day activities. And so all of these senior centers and recreation centers day-to-day wind up providing cool places to do activities over the course of a hot day. And so when we're choosing which centers to use, and senior centers are actually recreation run, Marta, fun fact. I had to learn that too last year. They work with aging, but they are run by recreation and parks. So sometimes we will use different senior centers as our cooling center sites. It's definitely a thing that happens, but we want to look at the disruption to existing services and make sure we're not kicking out people who would already be using that site. So we have to find a site that has a space that's not being used, that they don't have some special event over the weekend that we'd be kicking out of there, where people can get in and relax, and that it's not quite as closed off, because seniors use that space all the time. but when we call it a cooling center, any member of the public is allowed in. And so that's sort of the real distinction of a cooling center from a day-to-day site that is still definitely used for cooling purposes by the community. But it's something we constantly work on, and we're always trying to find the right balance of making sure that the community can still use the site for all of the wonderful planned activities that are happening there as well. And when there's significant heat, that we find ways to increase the hours, increase its availability.
Yeah. So thank you, Jennifer. That's really helpful. Every public-facing facility, like a library or senior center or Reagan Park facility that's already open, is serving a community during heat waves. And I guess what I would say is maybe what we should work on is increasing the number of seniors that are using the senior centers to protect them, and so that they have a place to go, and that we have a place for them to have respite and refuge, while we also more strategically target additional resilience centers and cooling centers where they're most needed.
I think that's it exactly, because there's so many services there that people can take advantage of if they become aware of how many things are happening. Nobody just wants to sit in a quiet center all day. They want things to do. It's great to build a community, to be part of a place where people feel safe, get a meal, get a resource, make a friend. All of those things is what we prefer cooling centers to have, right? That we're building community out of these centers, as opposed to just sort of having an empty room that people can go get cool in.
Exactly.
Awesome. And with that, that's pretty much our final question. I don't know, Marta, if you wanted any last words before we transition on into our next panel.
Thank you, Andres. No, I think she summed it up really well. Thank you, Jennifer.
Awesome. And thank you to Crystal, Micah, Alicia, Jen. Super appreciate y'all on this panel. And with that, I will now be introducing our next panel on unhoused climate hazard awareness, needs, and solutions, featuring the Director of Strategic Planning and Special Projects at Homeless Healthcare Los Angeles, Stephanie Campos, as well as the Director and Co-founder of the Division of Street Medicine at the Keck School of Medicine of USC, Brett Fieldman, and moderated right now with Marta Segura.
Thank you, Andres. Welcome, Brett. Welcome, Stephanie. We're really super excited to have you join us and share with us, what you've seen out in the field. What are some things that really work? What are some things that you feel need to change? And just to reiterate to the audience, across the nation, when we have heat waves, the statistic is that 50% of those who perish, those who die during heat waves, are the unhoused. So we have a special mission and commitment to ensure that that does not happen. And since extreme heat is no longer the silent killer, at least not in Los Angeles, amongst those of us here today, we want to do everything we can to prevent that. And these two individuals are heroes and sheroes in my book, because they're going out there doing the very difficult work of ensuring the safety of the unhoused in Los Angeles. So generally, Stephanie and Brett, we want folks to know what services and resources you provide to the unhoused and the housing insecure, particularly during extreme heat or weird weather that could put them at risk. And why don't we start with you, Stephanie?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to focus on a couple sites that I'm deeply involved with in Skid Row. I'm the director of the Refresh Spot. For those of you who don't know, it's a hygiene center, and it's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So anyone in the community can go inside and access showers, laundry, restrooms, phone charge, device charge, Wi-Fi connectivity, which is really hard to find in Skid Row, shade, drinking water during times where there is extreme heat or it's really, really cold. We do have a limited indoor space, even though the site is predominantly outdoors. It's a pretty large space. It's about 17,000 square foot facility, including the parking lot. So this was piloted back in 2017 out of the former mayor's office and has continued on to the current administration. And because there's no restrictions for entry, anyone can walk right in. We don't ask for people to provide names or any identifiable information. to access, basic hygiene needs. We get about 20,000 intakes every month. So it is high volume, and it's becoming a hub really in the area. And we have a dozen other partners in the community that come out and do more work because of the high volume and foot traffic that we get there. So we have so many different partners to do a lot of work that's needed, aside from, the restrooms and hygiene needs. People need so much more beyond that. So it's really served as a site to provide a lot of collaboration, and this is the only one that's in Skid Row, or that we know of. It's a one-of-a-kind space that was really created for the community, by the community. A local group had the idea for the site, and we kind of just are implementing their vision for the space. So that's, near and dear to my heart, because I've been involved with the Refresh Spot since the inception of it. But like, along with hygiene, accessibility, and the needs, just protection from the elements is so important. So I do want to talk a little bit also about the cooling stations that we piloted two summers ago out of the mayor's office as well, and in partnership with LADWP and Urban Alchemy, who staffs these cooling stations. We started these in the summer of 2021 as a pilot initiative, and we had 4 during the summer months during that summer. The difference between when you think cooling station, people tend to think, okay, we're going to be indoors, it's going to be climate controlled. This isn't that. They were these outdoor canopies. So they were logistically more flexible to kind of pop up wherever we kind of wanted them to, in areas of Skid Row that have less resources, maybe, with the potential to like scale up and expand them. So LADWP allowed us to use their fire hydrants to connect a water bar that filters the water and allows us to distribute water without. The idea was to be able to cut back on the plastic water bottle distribution and give out like aluminum reusable containers or paper cups. But these are canopies with misters. So it's really refreshing. It allows people a space to get like immediate respite from the heat. They're shaded. They're staffed 24/7. So not only is it a place to cool off, get water, get ice chips, sunglasses if they're available, sun protection products, all of that, but also engage with people and provide resource navigation. So that's also, it's like, what else can we do? How else can we connect with people and try to fit their needs and have that dialogue with them? So this summer is going to be our 3rd year in a row, and we're looking to do 4 again. And then just that first year, during those summer months, we had over 131 engagements throughout collectively the 4 cooling stations. So I'm kind of giving a lot of information in a nutshell. So I'll leave it there and just let you ask away any other questions.
Thank you, Stephanie. Great. Well, Brett, could you also tell us a little bit more about the services that you provide? And also, can you speak to the role trust plays in street medicine and your outreach team, and how you prepare your members to receive those services?
Sure. And first, I just want to say thank you for having me and welcoming me as your guest, and also to Stephanie for the Refresh Spot and the cooling stations. We send our patients there all the time, and I promise you, you know this, but they are lifesavers. So I guess a little bit about street medicine and what we do. Street medicine in general recognizes that people experiencing unsheltered homelessness can't access healthcare the way the rest of us do. And it's due to the various forms of poverty that they suffer from. Of course, there's the physical poverty of for housing or want of food, and we can fix those relatively easily if we choose to build housing and things like that. But there's also the poverty of health, physical, psychiatric, substance use disorders that, if not taken care of now while people are on the street, will prevent them from ever walking over the threshold into housing or being able to maintain the housing. But the worst poverty of all, the one that's hardest to fix, is the spiritual poverty of feeling unwanted or unloved by anybody. A poverty only deepened every time a neighbor asked to have another neighbor's encampment moved, and folks are pushed around the city. In LA, it's about 4 times a month that people either move or are moved. which makes it a challenge when setting up some of these stations. Or anytime a neighbor locks a public restroom on another neighbor, forcing them into the dehumanizing act of open defecation. And so our response is to go to the people first, to deliver a tender love and in response to that spiritual poverty, and then the same quality of care on the street that you would expect in a brick and mortar clinic. So we have doctors, physician assistants, nurses, community health workers who are ideally people with lived experience in homelessness who act as our street guides. We dispense medications, draw labs, do ultrasounds, treat mental health disorders and substance use disorders with medication-assisted therapy, all on the street in the patient's lived environment. We don't have a brick and mortar clinic. And so in addition to treating individuals, we also have a very important public health role, such as containing outbreaks of obviously COVID, but lice, syphilis, scabies, typhus. We just had a hepatitis A outbreak. We monitor food and water supply, which is where it really intersects with a lot of this work, as well as access to restrooms. And so one of the things that we're challenged with on this topic is that outside of Skid Row, and Skid Row is the largest concentration of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness in LA, but it's actually less than 10% of the total. But it's where most of the services are concentrated. And so outside of Skid Row, there's really very little and very few large encampments where you can set up one of these spots and reach a lot of people, which forces folks to leave and go somewhere. You just can't escape the heat the way that you can. If I know the last panel talked about the lack of air conditioning, but I started street medicine in Pennsylvania. It's very cold in Pennsylvania. People could prepare for the cold. Even sub-freezing temperatures, you could prepare, you can winterize your tent actually, and do okay. There's no escaping the heat. There's only so many clothes you can take off. And so it in a lot of ways, it's more dangerous. We see more complications from the heat here in LA than we did from freezing temperatures in Pennsylvania.
Wow, I didn't realize that, Brett. That's a really, insightful fact there. And I was going to ask both of you, what are some examples of collaboration with public agencies, whether city or county, and how have you seen that work, and how could we improve that collaboration? We can go with you, Brett, and then we'll go back to Stephanie.
We collaborate very, very closely with, especially the city of LA. And we work with the Circle team, the mayor's office. They're tremendous partners. Of course, LASA and all those things to house, because the folks we take care of, what we're hoping to take care of is the people who need our services the most. So they're usually the sickest and most in need of housing. So the city does just a phenomenal job of helping our patients who are most at risk find housing. So we speak to people from the mayor's office, I would say almost every day, in that sort of collaboration. So, and of course, Department of Public Health a lot as well.
That's really good to hear. Stephanie.
So I agree with Brett in terms of working very closely with the city. The Refresh Spot is funded out of the mayor's office. The cooling centers are funded out of the mayor's office through LASA contracts. So we collaborate with them very closely. Department of Health Services has a large mobile unit that comes on site to the Refresh Spot, and the HET team, the LASA HET team, is present as well. I mentioned LADWP earlier. They've been a great partner, and also Hilda Solis's office. They've had pet resource fairs for us that have been amazing. There's so many pets in the area at Skid Row, and people, have pets, and we had a justice resource fair this past Friday as well that was super beneficial to the community. So it's really important to cultivate the relationships and collaborate and have a greater impact that way.
Also really great to hear. So Stephanie, since we're with you, we also wanted to ask you if you can explain to us how harm reduction plays a role in your outreach resource development for providing housing to insecure communities.
Sure. So one of our guiding principles has always been harm reduction and meeting people where they're at, which means that you tell us what your needs are, and we'll do our best to try to meet them or get you to your goal. So it's all kind of guided by client feedback and them informing us of their needs and us respecting them as people, no judgment, with compassion through and through at any engagement. So that really helps us build the relationships with the people we work with, and they trust us, and which is not easy. People have been traumatized and re-traumatized and had horrible experiences with other entities. So we understand that. And so we do everything we can to kind of do everything through a trauma-informed model and a harm reduction approach, and just be very, just be kind to the people we work with. It just goes such a long way, and it leads to greater overall wellness and health outcomes.
So true. It's so true for all of us, right? Brett, did you want to comment on the harm reduction model? Or I know street medicine obviously does that, and how it's helped people get housed.
Oh yeah. I mean, the very act of street medicine itself is a act of harm reduction. And I completely agree with everything Stephanie said. The other thing I would add to it is we've actually found offering harm reduction supplies to be a great tool of engagement, where Stephanie mentioned this too, but just to expand on it, people have been extremely traumatized by lots of systems on the street, both the medical system, and there's actually published studies showing that the reason why folks don't access traditional medical care is because of previous negative experiences, and that they have people experiencing homelessness have worse health outcomes and are not given standard of care when they go to the hospital. And so it's not a imagined discrimination, but it's a real discrimination that has severe consequences. And there's also trauma around outreach, where people have been promised things, or a worker might say, I'll be back next week. They don't come back. And so as street medicine, we are both healthcare and outreach. And so part of one of the most important things we can do is help to earn that trust. We talk about earning trust more than gaining trust. And harm reduction is a great tool for that. And plus for me, I don't know if you're on camera, you can see, usually I'm a police officer until proven otherwise. That's usually what they think of me. And so if I offer them some harm reduction supplies, they think maybe I'm not a police officer. Maybe I am doing street medicine. And so, so that initial engagement leads to the ability to form tight relationships, and eventually leads to housing. Last year, 38% of everybody we saw wound up in housing. So we've just found that medicine in general, with all of the things we just said about feeling discriminated against, despite our efforts, still is seen as an instrument of peace, where we're there wanting as people who can help. And that has been a great housing tool as well.
Fantastic. I think this is actually a good time, Andres, to go to questions, because it feels like a good break for the question and answer period.
Yeah, I think maybe part of this was addressed in some of the points that y'all raised, but maybe if you could speak a little bit more to what are the strategies and moves being undertaken to disseminate information and resources to the unhoused community, and maybe some strategies of information that you found to be most effective, or some best practices.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Sure. So in terms of strategies for communicating with folks to try to capture a population, I can speak to my experiences in Skid Row, which I feel like it's its own very unique community, but like everything travels fast. So if people find out there's a resource at a certain area, people tend to know about it. So word of mouth is a real thing. And that's how information tends to travel, at least from what I hear and what I've seen over the years. Also just a lot of outreach. I think there's been a more presence in that area of just folks outreaching and engaging or roaming in the area and communicating directly. Of course, we always try to pass out flyers, but I think a little bit of that digital divide was brought up earlier, where people tend to have the phones that are provided, free, that are flip phones, maybe don't have the apps as accessible or as functional. Internet connectivity is also a barrier in the area in a lot of areas. So we do our best to try to outreach. We did launch at Homeless Healthcare LA an initiative a few months ago, earlier this year, where we have 2 golf carts that are always 7 days a week roaming through Skid Row boundaries to kind of engage with people. The focus is really trying to respond to potential overdose situations, but we engage with people on all levels. So it's a good opportunity to inform people of what kind of climate resources there are. The person that heads up that program actually reached out to me today, and they're asking, like, when are these cooling stations coming up? We need to let our folks know. And they're probably doing it face to face when that happens.
Speaking of pop-up stations for the homeless, Brett, you mentioned it's a lot easier to put those in Skid Row where you have a good mass of people that can access those resources. But I'll ask you both, what would be your 2 other targeted spots if you could, if you had these cool pop-up stations now, where would you put them?
For me, I mean, that's exactly right. The challenge outside of Skid Row is that folks are so scattered. If they're in encampments, they're small encampments, maybe 5 to 10. There's a lot of people who are alone. I mentioned before how often folks are moved. So if you put anything there that is stationary, people will be moved, and there will be it won't serve anybody anymore in a week or two. And we have that same problem with porta potties. The city, I mentioned our partnership with the city. And so we also ask our patients a lot of questions. We know that 85% are forced into open defecation. And so the city will put porta potties where they're needed. But then when folks are moved, then the porta potty is not where they are now, it's where they used to be. And now there's nobody there to use the porta potty. And so the same problem would be for a cooling station. And so the strategy, it takes more time and effort, but it's just us, really. Yeah. There's really not any other reliable way of communication. And that's why every one of our team has our community health workers, who is the whole reason why this works, because they know the streets, they know where people are moved to, they'll find people for us. If you ask where to go, then it would probably be in some of the parks. You can put them there and serve a decent number of folks, but you're not going to get to the 50,000 on the street.
Yeah. So I hear you basically commenting on the logistical challenges of the movement of individuals from one camp to another that's created sometimes by the city or the county itself, and then not moving the equipment to where the people are immediately in that same transition. And then I also hear you saying, well, maybe it's not more pop-up cooling stations we need, maybe we need more street medicine, maybe we need more healthcare workers on golf carts roaming the city to ensure that people are okay during the heat wave. And that's kind of, that makes sense. That actually makes sense to me, because I have not myself been able to pinpoint like good locations for more pop-up stations. And that's actually what we're thinking about right now. I'll turn it over back to Andres, because I think there's a couple more questions that just came in.
Yeah, we'll be taking just a couple more questions as we wrap up this section. So we had a previous question from registration. What can we do as members of the public to support our unhoused neighbors during heat waves?
I would carry water with you. so that anytime you see somebody, you can hand out water. The two most important things for the unhoused are shade and water. You know, we know from studies the under shade could be up to 30 degrees cooler than on the street. And we mentioned, you know, in the preparation for this, we just had like a global street medicine meeting. And so we're talking to our colleagues in Delhi and India, and it gets very, very hot there. And they set up these cooling stations actually all around the city, but there's many of them, and they allow people to use public facilities and public fountains, and, you know, understanding that this is life-saving. And I, you know, I know that we don't typically do that in LA, but it's one strategy.
That's awesome. And I'll just say before Stephanie steps in that I came back from a conference where there were a lot more healthcare organizations, Blue Cross, Mount Sinai, Altamed, you name it. They are trying to figure out how to get more involved with climate hazards and how they affect people's health. So maybe there's a connection there that we can make after this panel sometime to ensure that they're supporting the work that's already happening, and that you guys are championing and building best practices for. Stephanie.
So I agree with what Brett said in terms of what to pass out or do. I think being comfortable to engage with our neighbors is crucial. Water is so important during peak heat times, but just generally throughout the year, I always try to carry like snacks, non-perishables, hygiene kits, wound care kits. You know, I always have naloxone in my car. So anything you can do just to give someone something that will be of help goes a long way.
Thank you,
It's
Stephanie.
more than often, like, it's well received and really appreciated.
Oh, can I just add one more thing to carry with you? If you want to give out something more than water, it would be an umbrella, because that'll create shade.
Awesome.
And so I think just being mindful of time, I thought this was a really good question. Is there a cooling strategy for the vehicular unhoused? For example, mothers and children living in cars, vans, motorhomes, etc.
You want to start, Stephanie?
I'm not sure about the strategy, or I guess recommendations could be provided as to folks obviously should not stay in their car if they don't have AC, or if it's sitting there and it's hot, and it would be probably best to try to find shade and water or one of these cooling stations, but we know it's oftentimes a barrier for people just to get to them. So, I mean, it's just so helpful if we could find a way to make folks know like what's around them, what resources do they have. Yeah, that's a tough one. Brett, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I have nothing. There's not a strategy. You know, this is a real problem, which is why it's good we're having this conversation. And we see it, you know, just to add like some medical context to it, aside from drug overdose, the number 2 cause of death is heart failure. Up until actually a few years ago, heart failure was number 1. So it's very, very prevalent. And so you treat heart failure with diuretics, water pills. And so if you give them too much, they go into kidney failure. If you give them too little, they go into heart failure. And so in the summer months when it's hot and they're poor access to water, poor access to food, they're wearing all the clothes that they own because there's no dresser to put it in. And they're forced to walk around all day because there's nowhere for them to just sit without being asked to leave. Then you can see how difficult it is for us to manage it. You know, what dose should we give them? And if they don't take it, you know, maybe they go into heart failure, they do take it and they walked more than they needed to and it was too hot today, but not yesterday. They go in, you know, you could die. And so this is very difficult.
Yes, and since you said that, Brett, I just want to highlight for the audience too that every chronic illness is much more at risk of going into failure when there's an extreme heat wave, right? Because when we have heat waves in LA, heat waves exacerbate pollution, and that pollution decreases the oxygen that goes through your body, and it also increases exposure to the pollution. So many illnesses, too many to name here, are vulnerable to heat waves and are probably higher in communities like the unhoused. So it's another thing to consider for the nurses, doctors, healthcare professionals that are out there. When people come into your clinics and hospitals during heat waves, please consider that all of these cumulative impacts exacerbate death, and they may be going in for kidney failure, but it's as a result or catalyst from extreme heat. And the more that we acknowledge that in the general healthcare system, I think the better we can respond and the more lives that we can save. So I appreciate you saying that, Brett and Stephanie, about the chronic illnesses amongst the unhoused.
Awesome. And I think with that, we're pretty much ready to transition to our next and final session for the night. Thank you so much, Stephanie and Brett. Y'all are just incredible, and just super appreciate all the work that you all do for the folks who need it the most.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next and final speaker for today, Craig Tranby from the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, focusing on distributed energy solutions and partnerships. All you, Brett. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Andres. And I'm assuming the slides are up, even though I can't see them. I'll try to be direct. Oh, thank you. I'll try to be direct. There's a lot of programs that DWP offers, and I'll try to go through them as efficiently as I can, which is a nice theme for DWP. Here we are. And I want folks to maybe, we do have programs relating to shade and water, to segue from the last session. We do have shade tree programs, and we do have hydration stations, and there's incentives and for those and ways to provide those for close to free. So that does exist in the outdoor space. But I do kind of want to bring people back indoors a bit and think about managing or working our way through an extreme heat event, right, indoors, and how to keep the heat minimized in your indoor space. And we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. So here's a list of our programs. I won't go exhaustively through each and every one. These are a sampling that I think are relevant. There's a link at the top, which I think is also very useful. Folks can peruse that at their leisure. But we'll talk about the first couple here. So Efficient Product Marketplace has our Cool LA offer. And some folks might have heard about this, and I know this came up earlier in the discussion about having AC units, right, for every home or residence. And this is a way for qualifying customers to do that. There's basically a tripled rebate for about $225 that operates or exists on our online marketplace, and folks can apply for that. And through a very sort of shopping friendly kind of mechanism, and they can get that instant rebate back. And in many cases, it almost ends up being like a free air conditioning unit. These are portable units or wall or window units. So renters can certainly do this as well. For the next program, and there are other great devices on that Efficient Product Marketplace, so do check it out. A refrigerator exchange program. This is also another great offer for qualifying customers and nonprofit organizations. And I know there are some online here. You can get a free energy efficient refrigerator brought to your location and replacing your older refrigerator. Good to have that, good to save money with that, but that also keeps your interior space less hot, because an inefficient refrigerator is exhausting lots of heat into your living space. And that's just piling on to all the other forces working against you during an extreme heat event. Other programs, I mentioned City Plants is a free shade tree program. AC optimization. It's a way to get your central AC tuned up, and possibly free smart thermostats as well. Home Energy Improvement Program has various sort of smaller energy and water retrofits that can be brought to your residence and installed for you based on an assessment. So that's a great free program as well. Consumer rebate program are more of the traditional rebates, but I mention it because there are a few items that relate to extreme heat. Like there are rebates for cool roofs and windows replacement and whole house fans, which is a less expensive way to cool off the interior of your residence compared to an AC unit, which takes a lot more energy. And then we have the camera program. I would be remiss in not mentioning that, but it's basically an affordable multifamily retrofit program that you would approach the whole building, and that would be a very involved process with the landlord and tenant cooperation, but worth doing in advance where buildings would qualify for that. That's very a soup to nuts kind of program, a great recently launched program. Finally, we have Power Savers, which is a way for LADWP to make adjustments to your smart thermostats and during the extreme heat events, and without affecting your interior environment too much, but there is money back on that, subscribing to that program. So that can help offset your ultimate bill burden, right? So as we use more AC to protect ourselves, there's the concern about ongoing costs with that. And so this is one of the ways that can help. Next slide, please. So we have another type of program group that is financial assistance programs. And the link again at the top here is a good place to take a longer look at those. We've captured here a few of the main ones. Easy Save, I think, is the most commonly used one, and that's relating to income qualifications. The Lifeline rate, these are discounted rates basically on your electric bill or your utility bill, I should say. That's for seniors or folks with qualifying disabilities. And then there are a couple of other programs that might also be combined with the Lifeline rate. So something to consider there. We also offer level pay with fixed monthly payments. So the resident doesn't take the hit all at once during the summer months. The bill can be smoothed out over the year, and help manage that payment process, right? And then also at this web link at the top of the page, there's information about a couple of the state offered programs, LIHEAP and LIWAP, and those have additional support, financial, and there's also some retrofit assistance involved as well. Next slide, please. So here's where we come back to the ideas about how do we keep heat, right, out of our interior space. And so there's things you can do, tips to kind of prepare for that in advance. And then there are things you can certainly do during the heat event. And I'll just take a couple of quick minutes to go through those. We already talked about getting the AC units through the Cool LA rebate, right? And being aware of the limitations of fans. Fans can provide they're good for moving heat in and out of buildings, but once a building is hot, you have to be careful about it circulating the hot air, right? So be aware of that. Having substantial inside window coverings to block where sunlight comes in. It may sound obvious, but again, we're trying to keep heat out, right, and preserve cool air in. Weather stripping doors and windows. This is actually a very inexpensive thing to do. Little kind of paste on strips and door sweeps are very easy to quickly apply for anybody in just about any residence. And that, once again, keeps the cool air from going out and the hot air from coming in. Choosing efficient products, going back to the refrigerator comment earlier, various large appliances and lighting, the more efficient they are, the more money they're going to save you. But they're also going to exhaust less heat into your interior space, right? So it's going to keep your interior space cooler. And then going back outside, we have tree planting, window shading, and cool or light surfaces around your building. If you have any ability to paint the walls that face the south or the west and the south in particular, where the sun really especially hits, paint them a lighter, more reflective color. Cool roofs, of course, are a well-established concept to keep buildings cooler and save energy. Tree planting is certainly on those sides of the building, can help shade exteriors, as can umbrellas. Umbrellas were mentioned earlier, so an umbrella outside of a window can certainly help deflect that heat outside where we like it to stay. And then, of course, enrolling in financial assistance programs to offset perhaps increased use, right, of AC during these events. During the event, yeah, use your appliances less, especially cooking appliances and major like washers. Turn off the lights when you can. Don't leave things on or have things on excessively in your space that are putting heat into the space. Your personal, your body also needs to be cool through cool showers and light clothing. That's one that I think everybody kind of is aware of. Closing window coverings when the sun is hitting. We talked about that. But on the flip side, opening windows and running fans at key times, which would be the early morning and later in the evening. And so we want to basically exhaust that hot air out and pull, at the same time, it's pulling cool air in. So that's back to that concept. How do we either minimize or get rid of the heat, right, that's in our space? And then setting the AC to 78 or so can help moderate the use of it, but it can also help with your bill, but keep it at a fairly comfortable level if you have AC in that case. And again, you can get AC units through the rebate process here. Last slide, please. I'll try to wrap up. So just a few general sort of comments here. There's more information at our Cool LA website listed there, including a campaign toolkit for organizations. A big breaking news kind of announcement. Just this week, our board recently voted, or this week voted, to suspend the bill payment of collections related weather and shutoffs for all customers during extreme heat and cold weather events. Basically, they can't shut residents off for non-payment during extreme heat or extreme cold, which is great news for community-wide resilience and getting through these events. Sharing the resources with family and neighbors like this is very important, and especially keep in mind the most vulnerable around you. And with that in mind, we do have community partnership grants. I think a number of the panelists here on this session have received those grants, the nonprofit organizations, and they share information with communities just like this information I'm sharing right now, but they can do it, in their way to their audience and reach people that we can't otherwise reach. So we really appreciate that, and there are grants available for that. I do have to say, one grant deadline just passed today, but there will be another one coming up in the next few months. So check it out. And then lastly, there is a resilience hub in Boyle Heights. The DWP is helping, and partners are helping to contribute the latest clean technologies and systems and rebates and resources too. So that's exciting development there. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you. Andres, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Craig. Particularly appreciate the comments around the moratorium and just exciting news coming out of LADWP. And with that, we will be entering our outro with some final remarks from Marta Segura and Michelle. Starting off with Michelle on the context of the Climate Equity LA series and how we arrived to this series, and a little bit just kind of leading up to this moment as we transition out from this role. Michelle?
Thank you, Andres, and thanks to all the panelists. Gosh, what a substantive and informative program. And yes, Marta had asked me to help provide just kind of some summary remarks and key takeaways tonight as we conclude what is the second season of CEMO's educational programming and community workshops. And of course, just to go back to the very beginning, the whole purpose of the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office is really to advance equity in the city's energy and climate policy, and to do it through a robust community engagement process. And this whole series has really been devoted to trying to do that. So Just to go back and recap what we have done this 2023 year, our first program back in March actually highlighted the role of Indigenous communities and practices in managing ecosystem health. We heard from the president of the Fernandino Tatavian Band of Mission Indians, Rudy Ortega, who is also a CEMO commissioner, about how we can and how we must work for equal partnerships with tribal governments to address health disparities and to care for, maintain, and restore lands using tribal practices to address wildfire risks and hazards. Then in April, we heard from leading environmental justice organizations, SCOPE, and again, Pacoima Beautiful, who is with us tonight, about the role of community resilience. And a key takeaway was that community voices, especially those impacted first and worst, really must be in the room shaping policy to develop multi-benefit solutions. We learned that social cohesion is critical in fostering community resilience, and that the role of the nonprofit sector in educating and building resident networks is actually really huge. There's real promise and so much of the work that is going on right now to undertake collective projects like tree planting that we heard about, expansion of green spaces and green water infrastructure, integration of active transit, pedestrian, bike, electric car share. All of that helps to build awareness around extreme heat and climate change and builds the social relationships that will help to get us through the next period. In May, we focused on the crucial theme of worker protection, especially for outdoor workers, but for indoor workers as well. We heard from labor organizers, health promotores, the UCLA LOSH program, and Climate Resolve, who talked about the critical need for extensive worker education, employer education, healthcare provider education. We heard some of those themes again tonight. There's a compelling need for standards, for clear standards regarding heat exposure, both indoor and outdoor, temperature thresholds, enforcement of those thresholds, and also changes in regulations for when outdoor work needs to be prohibited due to untenable extreme heat. So thinking about landscapers, construction workers, agricultural workers, oil and gas workers, but also the indoor workers in warehouse and garment and indoor car washes, just as a few examples. So those were our first three sessions. And then tonight, I really must say, I feel like I do live in the City of Angels with the incredible work being led by not only the USC Street Medicine Program and Homeless Healthcare Project, but really all the incredible community representatives and government representatives, agency reps who are really working to implement innovative and creative programs to help people. So I want to say that. So just to summarize and turn it back over to Marta, we need to be prepared at the individual and household level, first of all, secondly, at the community level, and third, at the policy level. So recapping. Broad popular education at the individual and household level so that people know how to protect themselves and when to expect heat events. Angelinos need to know how to prepare, protect their children, the elderly, and their neighbors. The city should and is actively working to expand its outreach to help people connect to services, as you saw Craig just outlined for us. And the nonprofit community is really trying to provide a big assist here as well, given its broad and deep reach. At the community level, we need school districts. We heard from Lane about the LAUSD and community colleges, the nonprofit community, industry and employer sector, labor unions, healthcare providers. We all need to be thinking about extreme heat and preparing our respective sectors for how to prepare and protect individuals and families, making them aware of current practices and services. And then at the policy level, many people addressed that this evening and in our past sessions, we need to take both a regulatory approach as well as an investment approach. I think that's how I would how I would break it out. At the level of regulation and standard setting, we need to take a serious look at utility rate reform, as our LADWP just did this week, as Craig mentioned, expanding and extending moratoriums on water and power shutoffs, making rate structures more affordable for people, looking at temperature thresholds in the workplace as a couple of examples, and new rules around indoor heat exposure. Then I would go on to just, and both for workers as well as for tenants. I think we heard a lot about tenant protections this evening. At the level of the investment approach, many examples cited over our last several sessions and again tonight, that city and public entities need to continue providing and expanding financing and incentives for accelerated investment in tree canopy, cool streets, cool roofs, expanded bus shelters, resilience hubs, and retrofitting of low income and nonprofit multifamily affordable buildings, all to help decrease our carbon footprint and to increase protection, comfort, and safety. And I think we also heard about investing in coordination tonight between agencies. Clearly, a lot of that is going on between agencies and the nonprofit sector and with our public utilities. So CEMO has a huge challenge ahead, and it is rising to the occasion to try to follow through on all these really significant and heavy lifts, really, big programs and policies to try to advance forward. But the feedback and the information that we get from these sessions has been really invaluable. Just to close, because it is Liberty Hill's last evening for being in full partnership with CEMO on this series, even though I know we'll be supporting in the future as well. The UN Secretary General, this is how we started the series back in March, said in the climate report that came out that month in March of 2023, humanity is on thin ice and the ice is melting fast. Our world needs climate action on all fronts, everything, everywhere, and all at once. So I think this series has helped us to see that in our own way here in Los Angeles. And Marta, you and Rebecca and everyone involved at the Climate Emergency Mobilization and with the LEAP Coalition who helped to bring the office into existence are really helping spearhead all of what we need to do. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. Words can't express how grateful we are, all of us, the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office, the City of LA, the Mayor's Office, and I am sure Alex just commented for LEAP LA. We really appreciate all of your thoughtful and collaborative partnership in this work, Liberty Hill, and especially you, Michelle. And I'm glad that you're saying that we will cross paths again because I certainly expect that and hope to see you soon. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate all of the phenomenal leadership, expertise, inspiration, heartfelt comments, the spiritual guidance that we received from Brett on how to relate to the unhoused. All of us need that level of care and support. That's what humanizes us. That's what makes us a community. And we really wanted to highlight that for this session, that we are all one big community. And the more that we help others, the more we help ourselves. I did want to remind folks that we have quite a few resources. So this is a call to action. If you haven't already, join the Heat Relief for LA network. We have the links here. You'll get them later. CEMO heat resources are at climateforla.org. Please download our beautiful heat relief poster in various languages. And we will let you know as soon as we print some in various languages. And I won't go through everything here, but these are phenomenal resources that we've created for you. And we will continue to share this in our social media. It's on our website. You'll get it when you get the summary notes and also the recording of this session. And again, I want to thank the production team of Ray, Andres, Rebecca, everybody at CEMO. You guys did a phenomenal job in these past 2 years. And when we first got started creating these productions, I just didn't know how it was going to happen, but you all led the way to create really professional but community-led productions. Again, good night, everyone. Thank you so much, and have a safe, heat-safe weekend for this 4th of July.